Hey, Alex, how's it going?
How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually really impressed with that countdown. That's new. Actually, we took some user feedback and we're trying some new stuff, but I liked how it kind of like was color, 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 and then just went black at the end. It was really cool. So
I
great
love
job
it.
to the team. Yeah.
We
Hey,
call it the
so
final countdown.
it's Friday episode of Okcoin Live.
I love it. Welcome, Sam. Happy Friday. How are you? How was your week?
I'm good. I'm good, man. I'm feeling good. I'm getting moved in to my new place in Miami Beach. Apparently where everybody and anybody is moving for crypto these days.
I gotta join you. I'm in DC. It's rainy, cold. Much rather be with you on the beach.
Yeah, I know. Well, today we have something that may just brighten up your day a little bit. We have the Stacks team, and well, specifically Munib from Stacks, and then Brittany Laughlin from the Stacks Foundation, who's going to be joining us for OKCoin Live. So let's just bring them on. Brittany, Munib, pleasure to have you guys. Welcome to OKCoin Live.
Hey everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Well, thanks so much for having us.
So I guess I can start. Maybe you can kind of like dive in a bit more into like what the difference is between what you're doing at Stacks and what's happening at the Stacks Foundation. Like, what role does is there a Stacks team, or is it sufficiently decentralized now where you, Munib, and the other developers are just kind of building out additions and then getting them added, or like having them up for proposal and getting them added? So like, maybe you can explain like what the two roles are between your two organizations.
Yep. So I think there is no Stacks organization, right? My company's name is Hero. From people who are fans of Snow Crash, they would recognize it as the main character of the novel. So Hero is a developer tooling company. And I think Stacks Foundation is a foundation for nonprofit, and I'll let Brittany explain that more. But I think the main thing to keep in mind is there is Stacks Project, which is like Bitcoin, right? Like there's no company behind it. It's open source. It's a community. It's a project, and that's what Stacks is. And I think I along with other people, kind of like created the project. We kind of like did some early development of it. But now there are so many independent entities in this ecosystem. There are more than 30 entities actually in this ecosystem now. And Hero is one of those companies, and Hero specifically builds developer tools. So it's a very developer-focused company, and that's why maybe it's less public-facing. Like they mostly communicate with developers, and their audience is mostly developers. And I'll let kind of like Brittany explain the Stacks Foundation.
Yeah, so as Vineet said, the Stacks Foundation, we're a nonprofit corporation. Our job is to support the ecosystem with our treasury. We have about 100 million Stacks tokens, and we get those in the hands of the community members through things like grants, education. We have things like our residence program. We have a number of programs that are meant to support the ecosystem. So we're not for profit. Our goal is to help develop the ecosystem. And I think long term, the goal is like, maybe the foundation eventually just disappears because the ecosystem has grown large enough. There's enough other companies that are doing for-profit things in the industry, or even nonprofit things in the industry, to support the Stacks blockchain in a lot of different ways. So we kind of also we do support governance. So it's not just the foundation, but we do play an active role to ensure that if there are any upgrades to the blockchain, it's managed by the community, but the governance is housed within the Stacks Foundation as well. So that's a key part of any upgrades.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit there that usually in crypto, you would notice that there will be some large company behind a project, and then they would have a foundation, which is kind of like the same people, right? And interestingly, some of the times the foundations are offshore, like outside of the US, and they do a lot of token offerings. That is absolutely not the case here. The Stacks Foundation was independently formed much later in the lifetime of the project, and it actually never did any token offerings. So it's purely a nonprofit, mostly focused on promoting like an open internet with a bias towards building it around Bitcoin, but really promoting an open internet. And it has never done any token offerings. It has never kind of like been engaged in any scope other than the scope of like just basically helping the community and developers, which is very different from typical crypto projects where the foundations are actually playing very active roles in many ways. And similarly, I think we even if you look at the distribution of the within the Stacks ecosystem, there's actually no single entity that has even 10% of the supply of Stacks. Right, so it was really decentralized, and even the distribution of Stacks, that the team members, the early team members, they organically went off to do various things in the ecosystem, right? So there are so many different entities like Freehold, Daemon, New Internet Labs, Secret Key Labs, OBY. Like it's effectively like the early contributors to the open source project. They basically went off to contribute to this ecosystem however they saw fit, which is in a sharp contrast from some of the crypto projects where there's actually one pretty large company behind everything. And I think that company is kind of like really building a lot of the stuff. And we are actually very proud of the fact that this ecosystem is very decentralized. It's sometimes obviously it becomes harder to do things as well. Like sometimes a single company can actually work more efficiently, but then you're not really building in a fully open, decentralized way, which I think, especially if you're building in Bitcoin, like Bitcoin, I think is the best example of a decentralized ecosystem. And I think we wanted to share those values with the Bitcoin community.
So it's been almost 2 years since, or correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's almost been 2 years since you've finished the Reg A Plus raise, where pretty much, I mean, the beauty of a Reg A Plus is that both retail and institutional investors were able to take part in it, which means that anyone could have contributed to the initial fundraising for Blockstacks, which is I think you guys are singular in projects that have done that so far. So I guess there's a two-part question here. The first would be for you, Maneem, in that looking back on that experience, how do you feel about that now? Like, would you still have gone through that same process looking back on it? And then also for Brittany, like, what role did the Stacks Foundation take any part in that role of that Reg A Plus raise, or was everything that the Stacks Foundation doing coming afterwards after that initial securities raise was done?
Yeah, I can explain that. So I do think that the path that we chose for doing the SEC qualified public offering, there were two reasons for it. Like the first reason was when the project was starting off, we had a community, we had developers, and interestingly, when we were looking at kind of like the legal frameworks, it seemed like if we would do a token offering, a lot of the community members and developers would actually get left out of that. So in many ways, the public offering, the core reason for doing the public offering was to open it up to anyone on the planet that we could, like including US people, including people who are not accredited investors, because it just didn't feel right that you're discriminating based on like how rich you are. Really, that's what the accreditation laws are. And we wanted to open it up to the community members, and we're very proud of the fact that it actually took a long time. Definitely like, more than like 14, 16 months working with the SEC. It was a very expensive process as well. Like I don't think any project that didn't have capital or being able to hire kind of like expensive law firms, and actually not just about the law firms, like the amount of time and effort, like even for me personally, that went into it was a lot, right? And I'm a computer scientist. I want to spend my time kind of like building up the technologies. But we did that because it felt like the right thing to do, to have open access for everybody. And I think our community really appreciates that, and that they got in, even from a pricing perspective, like they got the same price as some of the larger investors and whatnot. And secondly, I think from a legal perspective, we know that regulations around crypto assets are very kind of like unclear, and there's uncertainty everywhere. But at least like for complying with the SEC qualification for the offering, at least you can be comfortable that the offering itself is a legal offering, right? So years down the road, nobody can come around and be like, hey, that offering that you did, that was actually like illegal. Like at least we can be comfortable that the offering itself was fully legal, and it actually resulted in a lot of transparency as well. And you asked about like some of the downsides. I do think there was a lot of overhead, right? Like you wanna focus on your technology, you wanna like move fast, you wanna basically spend your time and attention not on dealing with complicated legal overhead, but just focus on the things that you're building. And I don't think like every entrepreneur that is starting off can even afford it, right? It's a very expensive process with tons of overhead.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that like if you really want to be a shipping dev in DeFi or in crypto today, you have to remain anonymous and just put a product out there, and maybe what like just stay under the radar, right? And for people that want to be fully transparent, it's just incredibly hard to ship and push product. You have to focus so much on the legal aspects. But I guess that brings me into my second point, Brittany, about like what role did the Stacks Foundation take any role in that, and when when did the foundation come about, and how was it funded?
Yeah, so the initial token offering was done through Blockstack PBC, which is now part of Hero. But the Stacks Foundation wasn't formed at that point. It was formed last May, that's April, right on the border there. And its role is, not to do any token offering. As Mandeep said, we've never done that. But part of that, allocation around the treasury of those tokens that were held initially by Blockstack PBC, there was always an amount designated to go into a treasury for things like the foundation. So the foundation now oversees those, a portion of those tokens. It was laid out in our initial token economics. And so we're able to, use those to get them back in the hands of the community. But I think one of the interesting things about the Reg A as well from Stacks ecosystem is that it really created a regulatory path for other projects to think about how to do something in a compliant way, being able to open it up to small users. You don't have to be accredited to participate in that. And I think really laying the groundwork for that and then open sourcing all of that, so all of these documents are public, was really helpful. What we see now, though, is that developers are really excited to build on top of Stacks because it did take this regulatory route. It did go through all of the checks and balances. So there's not as much risk around regulation of, was this done in a way that wouldn't be compliant or wouldn't allow them to build over the long term. So I think that's been really beneficial, and we've seen users be really excited about that.
Yeah, I want to follow this path of building. I'm going to ask you guys a spicy one, so I hope you're ready. Like, I think we're all big fans of Bitcoin. And obviously, you guys chose, when you chose to build on top of Bitcoin. I want to ask you a two-parter. So one is, why Bitcoin? Why are we building upon that ecosystem? And the other, here comes the spice and the alpha leaks for our audience. A lot of times over Twitter, I follow you, I follow some of the other Bitcoin, let's say diehards, let's call them that. And there are some people from the Bitcoin community saying, Stacks, it should only be Bitcoin, and Stacks shouldn't have a token, and kind of come after you for that, which I find a little bit peculiar. Let's just use that word. But I don't know if you guys can comment on that. So why Bitcoin? And then how do you handle the criticism of, now that you're actually building on top of Bitcoin, which is what we all want, now people are coming and criticizing you and saying, well, the stack shouldn't have a token, and we'll leave it at that. So how do you react to that?
So I would say that I'm a Bitcoiner. Well, I'm a computer scientist before being a Bitcoiner, and then I became a Bitcoiner in 2013. And I've been building in the Bitcoin ecosystem for many years now. And interestingly, the Bitcoin diehard people have literally criticized every single thing that we have done over the years, right? So it's very hard to not be criticized by these people, because they tend to be very close-minded. Like, for example, for some of the let me answer your first question, right? That why Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin, because two reasons in my mind, right? Like, one, it is the best decentralized money layer out there. right? And I think that that's a huge thing. I do believe that one form of money will eventually dominate. Like we call it the future reserve currency of the world, the best store of value. And I think Bitcoin by far is in the best position of doing that. And the second reason is actually mostly technical, right? That from a technical perspective, this layered architecture where you have a relatively simple base layer and then you're building other layers of complexity on top of it is actually very similar to how time-tested things like the internet itself, with a very simple, base TCP/IP layer, or even operating systems like Unix and Linux have been developed, where the base layers are very, very simple, and you build more complexity on top. So from a technical perspective, Bitcoin design is actually very global, very secure and durable at the base layer, and you want to build, layers of, just like Lightning is a payment, like a faster payment layer. Stacks is a smart contract layer in a way that settles on Bitcoin. So those are the reasons, and I think Bitcoin got the technology right, and the community around Bitcoin, they're laser focused on basically the money use case, right? And I think it's a very, very hard thing to win, and they're winning, right? Like Bitcoin by far is the thing that is perceived as money more than anything else. And in terms of the criticism, as I said, that when we were building things while doing like a lot of opt return transactions, people were criticizing us that you're spending too much, you're basically polluting the Bitcoin blockchain because you're writing so much spam data on the Bitcoin blockchain. When we were building kind of like all sorts of new types of use cases directly on top of Bitcoin, people were like, no, Bitcoin is just money, just forget about it. We don't need kind of like these new types of use cases. Whereas Satoshi was involved in those use cases. Satoshi was open to all of these use cases and building things in a way. And the design of stacks is actually very carefully designed in a way that it doesn't pollute the Bitcoin blockchain. We don't have those types of issues that we are spamming the Bitcoin blockchain and we're storing too much data there. It actually doesn't pollute the Bitcoin blockchain at all. It's carefully designed to actually be incentive compatible with Bitcoin because it gives miners a much higher incentives to actually pay transaction fees, really high Bitcoin transaction fees to be a miner. So there is criticism for Bitcoin that what would happen when the Bitcoin Coinbase rewards run out, and Stacks actually fills in that gap by giving incentives for people to actually pay very high fees at the Bitcoin base layer. And the reason why you have a separate gas asset is because we wanted to build an open network. And a lot of people who have this blanket criticism of gas assets actually don't understand the technology. That, what's the difference between a federation, or what's the difference between a closed network and an open network? And if you want to build an open network, you have to give miners the incentive so that anyone can come in and actually mine the network. Or you could trust companies, right? And a lot, like for example, I think recently you might have noticed that there were some comparisons between Liquid and Stacks, and I really respect the work that Blockstream does and the contributions that they've made. But the reality is Liquid is a federated network, right? And there is a little bit of a logic circuit break that where people who stand for decentralization and will die on that hill would actually prefer trusting a few companies on a federated network and say that this is better than a open network where anyone can be a miner and it's completely decentralized, right? So I think over there, like at some point, it's no longer rational, right? I think people's emotions come into play, people's training. Like I think there has been a lot of brainwashing and training in the Bitcoin community to blanket reject any asset that is not Bitcoin. And I think that kind of like kicks in instead of like more rational thinking for how's this good for Bitcoin? How is this actually going to grow the Bitcoin ecosystem and grow the Bitcoin economy by bringing all these new use cases to Bitcoin?
Do you care
I guess
about this?
Well,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sam.
Yeah.
No,
I wasn't. I have a little bit different nuanced question. So, like, what is the reason for building on, like, using the Bitcoin security layer to build a smart contract platform versus building like a trustless bridge where you can wrap Bitcoin as a digital asset and then take it to another open decentralized network that doesn't rely on Bitcoin security for its security?
Yeah, let me explain that through an example, right? So let's say that there's a Bitcoin lending application, and people are building these types of lending applications. In our model, so Stack, by the way, another thing people don't realize is Stacks has a cross-chain solution. So when people are building applications, part of your application can live on the Bitcoin side, part of the application can live on the Stack side. So in a Bitcoin lending application, if you're building in the Stacks model, you can have pure Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain that you could lend out by doing just a Bitcoin transaction. So in terms of security, that is the most secure way of keeping your Bitcoin, because a wrapped asset is a different asset, right? Like it depends on the security of the other blockchain, not the security of Bitcoin. Plus, a wrapped asset also often involves like middlemen. So you're going through a custodian, you're going through like other types of trusted parties in the middle, maybe KYC to actually use the custodian. Whereas the purest form of Bitcoin lending is when you're just doing a Bitcoin transaction to do the lending, and your collateral is in a smart contract on the Stack side. So these types of applications are basically not possible outside of the model that Stacks has. The other model would be that you have something like wrapped BTC, where it's an asset issued by a custodian. So you're trusting the custodian, you're trusting the security of a EVM layer, which has a much higher kind of like security attack vector than Bitcoin, that is rock solid and is basically hardened to basically protect your money, right? And you want to keep your money at the most secure place and not keep your money in a less secure place.
So speaking on this, what other projects? Let's talk about a little bit about the roadmap, right? And so there's the roadmap of Stacks. There's Stacks 2.0 that's coming out, or the community has to vote on it coming out, and there are other projects being built on top of Stacks. So what do you guys see as both what's next and what's critical to be next? Because those things, two things can be slightly different, right? In terms of, look, you want to scale Stacks, you want to make it faster. You guys introduced microblocks. There's, again, talks about Stacks 2.0. If you can explain what that is to our audience. And then what would you like to see? There are a lot of themes that are going out in the space now, NFTs, metaverse, a game, play to earn, and so on and so forth. So paint the picture for us.
Yeah, I'll let Brittany chime in on this as well. I'll just say that interestingly, because there's no Stacks team, there's also no Stacks roadmap, right? Like there are a bunch of independent companies, each have like their own thing that they're doing. Yes, they collaborate and talk to each other on GitHub, but there's like, how you can go to a project and just click on like /roadmap and you'll see a roadmap. A lot of people ask us about that, hey, where's the roadmap? And then we like, to have a roadmap also has the question of like, whose roadmap are you talking about? Are you talking about like Hero, that's a dev tooling company? So I'll let Brittany chime in some of the stuff from the foundation side. But from where I see, I think, so Stacks 2.1 is the next big upgrade, which I think what you meant. But there is another upgrade happening before that, basically, interestingly, because Stacks is a open network and developers seem to like what we have done, Stacks is actually running at full capacity right now, right? Like which is something that I think a lot of people should actually celebrate in the Bitcoin community, because one of the biggest criticisms of any Bitcoin project from Ethereum and outside people has been nobody cares, nobody uses these things. Like if you look at the block explorers of some of the other side chains and federated networks, they're basically empty, right? Like nobody's using these networks even after years of deployment. And Stacks was launched, the mainnet, in January of this year, and it has seen so much traction. There is at one point like close to $1 billion locked up in a smart contract, earning 10% in Bitcoin. Something like I think 900 Bitcoin have gone out as rewards, which is like close to $50 million. Right? And people are launching like NFTs, people are launching like all these stable coins, and it's organic, and the blocks are full because it's a decentralized network, and it doesn't have the kind of extremely fast speeds that you get if you sacrifice decentralization. And there are a bunch of scalability things coming on that I'll talk about. And interestingly, no one can really upgrade the network either because it's so decentralized, right? Like independent miners have to kind of like upgrade the network. So there is a community kind of like, there's a Stacks improvement proposal that's going on, mostly for network capacity. I think it can actually 10x the network capacity if it goes through. There's an active vote. So anyone who's a stacker, meaning that they've locked up capital to earn Bitcoin, and you haven't voted, you should go to, like, I think it's called SIP 12.xyz with the website, where there's a vote going on, and you can actually give input on, do you want 10x more capacity, or do you don't want it? I'm obviously voting yes. So that's a big upgrade that's coming up within a month or so if the vote goes through and miners actually deploy it. And then in terms of the roadmap, as I mentioned, that every company has their own roadmap. You mentioned the Stacks Accelerator earlier as well. That's also a completely independent company that somebody came in and started funding those people. So from the Hero side, I can tell you that we are working on developer tools. We're focusing a lot on smart contracts. We actually started seeing a lot of traffic on our APIs. To share some numbers, I think we were getting something like 200 million requests like last month. This month, we're getting 300 million requests. So we're trying to keep up with the demand that developers have, and trying to build the best smart contract developer tools for them. And with that, I'll hand over to Brittany.
Great. Yeah, well, Manib sort of, hinted at a lot of these big themes that have been coming out at the Stacks Foundation, because we have programs where we fund grants. Grants can be as small as like $100 and go up to a few $1,000s. We've made investment as well in the Stacks Accelerator, so we've helped just make sure there's early support for that. But we've seen some of these things grow up. So Arcadico, which launched last week, I think they have over $50 million in total value locked. This is a great place for people who are yield farmers. This is taking place on Stacks, and it's the first of its kind. Now, that company came through the grants program and then through the accelerator. So we've seen that team. So at the foundation, we don't really set the roadmap, but we can kind of see what's coming next because of the builders who are coming to us looking for more support. And with that, we've seen a number of NFTs, especially folks who want to take NFTs to the next level of how do you create NFTs at the intersection of DeFi, where they're actually earning Bitcoin while holding an NFT. And that's something that is unique to Stacks because of our proof of transfer. That's our consensus mechanism. If you participate in stacking, you're reaping the rewards of that as well. But that's something that I see is coming next. And we see a lot of developers interested in building smart contracts on that. We've also seen just a growth in the number of Clarity developers. So we had over 150 developers take part in the first Clarity University. So all of those people looking to build their new smart contracts on Stacks, there's a lot more talent coming into the ecosystem. So I think there's a lot of exciting things that are just in their earliest stages. But if you want, we have an open GitHub. You can see all of the grantees, all of their applications. You can get a sense of what's coming next based on what these builders are doing. And I think that's like a huge win for consumers who are excited about Stacks, because there's a lot of stuff that you can use your Stacks for. And then in addition to that, we have a lot of governance work happening as well. So just on-chain voting, kind of like Manib said, that was something recently set up for a SIP. I think that there will be a lot of big improvements coming through this independent governance working group that we're seeing.
So how does that process work for the accelerator? Like, if I'm a developer and I want to come build on Stacks, like what does it look like? How long does it take? How does the grant proposal system work? And what is the kind of, like, from start to finish am I looking at with working with the foundation?
Yeah, great question. So I think that there's all sorts of levels that you can participate. So the grants program is a rolling application. It typically takes a week to get your grant reviewed. So you should get feedback right away. Those grants, they get funded, within the month of when they're approved. So those can be small grants, like I said. They can, they've gone up to, I think, about $50,000. We've awarded over $600,000 in grants through that program to about 50 projects. That's one avenue that you can take. The next avenue is the Stacks Accelerator, which is an independent company that runs the accelerator. I think they just reopened applications. So if you have a business in mind that you want to create that is part of the Stacks network, you would apply through their accelerator program. I think it's, it's typical of something like Y Combinator, where they have a month and a half, I think, of open applications. Then the program lasts a number of weeks. And then after graduation, the goal is to fundraise for your business. So if you're doing something with a very clear objective and a very clear business, that would be a path. And then there's a third path that is our residence program, which is a year-long funding that focuses on research. So this is for people who are maybe working in governance or developing new tooling or more support of the blockchain itself. These may not be commercially viable as businesses, but they're very important to the ecosystem. So we're able to fund those longer term grants as well. And I think that program is pretty unique to the Stacks Foundation across the crypto ecosystem. So for people who really want to take a year and be able to spend that full amount of time developing new tools.
So Munib, like where, so you guys are, your developers are having to code in Clarity. That's, I guess, a little bit different from most other smart contract platforms like Ethereum or Avalanche or any of the other ones where they're primarily using a form of Solidity. I know that Solana uses Rust, but one of the things about building out a brand new stack is that all of the dev tooling that say the Ethereum guys have been building for the past 5 years, that's already in place. So if anybody wants to go use that, say for like oracles or for indexing, that's already been built out. So where's that in the process for Stacks? Like how far along is the developer tooling process? Because I know that's probably one of the most important things that probably doesn't get talked about too much. Like what are some of the key things that you guys are working on at Hero to build? And what are you hearing from your developers saying like we need this more than anything else to be able to start pushing projects out?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I would say that the best way to understand the Stacks project is there are basically two contrarian bets that the early team made. Right? The first bet is that we're going to build around Bitcoin. And this is like, back in 2017 when this was starting, a lot of people were basically building separate blockchains, right? And in many ways, like there was this almost like a consensus like in the industry that Ethereum is the clear winner and other blockchains are never going to catch up or they won't get any traction and so on. And I feel like within the last 6 months, we have kind of like seen with the rise of Solana and Avalanche that there's broader consensus now that we are heading towards a multi-chain world. And I think the bet that Stacks took was even one level deeper. Like we didn't just say like, hey, no, it's not going to be Ethereum, but a multi-chain world. We actually said you're going to see smart contracts around Bitcoin, which I think like even currently the industry does not fully realize like how big that market is, like how big of a potential there is for that market. And I think it's still a contrarian bet out there. So I think that's the first bet that we have made, which is a very contrarian bet that we're going to build on Bitcoin. The second bet, again, I think is very, very contrarian, is that the only thing that matters for a smart contract language in the long term is the security of the language. It's not the speed, it's not the ease of programming, it is the security and safety property of the language. And that's our bet on Clarity, where that language is effectively designed as a first-class smart contract language, whereas Solidity is basically JavaScript that was designed for web development in the 90s, and they've taken that to do smart contracts with it. Right? I refuse to believe...
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like I've heard some of the Ethereum devs, like at least the core devs, and like they all say like, look, if we could go back to 2016, 2017, and completely rewrite Solidity from the beginning, of course we would do so much differently, right? But you start with something and then you go and then it becomes legacy and you just have to build on it more and more and more. So like whatever Solidity is today, I mean, it's a product of years of work of people of great developer work putting into it. I guess my point that I was asking was that like it was just more about like the amount of developer tooling that's there. Like you mentioned Solana, like Solana for the first year was practically unusable just because the tooling wasn't there. And now they've started to train their devs and they really have a robust library that developers can come and use. So like where is Stacks in that process of having that robust library? I understand that like security is super important, but
let me rephrase it in another way, right? We recently did almost like a hackathon where people were trying to build most of the use cases that you have seen in crypto. Like you're talking about like automated market makers, stable coins, NFT marketplaces, anything you can think of that people are doing in crypto. And people were effectively able to build all of that using Clarity, that means that the dev tools and the resources available are above a certain level of threshold where developers can even do that today. Like they can do it. Obviously, there are things that I would love to see. I would actually point to one the dev tool built by Hero is called Clarinet. And I think Clarinet, I'm obviously biased here, as a dev tool might be light years ahead of anything you can find in Solidity even right now, in terms of how easy it is to deploy contracts, debug them, and then start plugging in, automated checks for security and things like that. It's like, talk to the developers who are using Clarinet and then ask them to compare that dev tooling standard with what's available in the industry, and they'll tell you like, we love this. Not trying to say that Clarity is a more mature language ecosystem than Solidity. Solidity is by far much more mature right now. But I think like you're talking about in the grand scheme of things, what I care about is there's $1 billion locked up in a single smart contract in Clarity. I can sleep at night knowing that Clarity is a safe language versus the amount of trouble I would have sleeping at night knowing that somebody could actually go and hack that $1 billion out of the contract much more easily. I'm not saying Clarity is bulletproof, but Clarity reduces the attack vector by an order of magnitude.
Yeah.
So I
And I
guess
just want to mention too, it's Clarity isn't unique to just the Stacks ecosystem. It's also used by Algorand. They do a lot of financial transactions. They wanted to have that security as well as that, clear code, the clarity of it. And we've seen just within the foundation, funding different builders who are creating new smart contract standards in a similar way that you have, ERC 20s that already exists in Stacks. I do think that we are still under-resourced on the number of developers who are comfortable writing in Clarity. It's why we've, put time and resources behind the Clarity University. I think that that's growing. But I also think that, we do live in a multi-chain world. And at the foundation, our view is that, these tools that help bridge to other networks is a huge advantage. And we've already seen proposals to bridge into Ethereum or Solana ecosystems, which would allow people to build on Stacks. But if they want to take advantage of some of those other unique features of those other ecosystems, they could do that. So I think that's the way that we're going, is that, maybe Clarity is not the most popular language, but for developers who want those secure transactions and that ease of reading those transactions, they can use Clarity in their application, even if they piece together other parts of cryptocurrency chains at the time.
So like with Clarity, like what sort of things, or I guess you'll be able to build smart contracts, but like what kind of different products are you going to find on the Stacks ecosystem that you wouldn't be able to find like in Ethereum? Like how can Stacks leverage the Bitcoin blockchain to be able to provide just a different flavor of DeFi, or actually new primitives or new products that people have never ever used before?
Yeah, so I think the Bitcoin yield is, I would say, the first primitive that just doesn't exist anymore, because Stacks is a Bitcoin yielding asset. And the way the Bitcoin yield works is there's logic on the Stacks contracts that is effectively directing the Bitcoin payments on the Bitcoin base layer. That's a very, very unique primitive, because you're now effectively making Bitcoin programmable that way. And similarly, I think recently someone built out native Bitcoin swaps. Extremely interesting concept. Like imagine, one of the biggest criticisms of Bitcoin is that, hey, it's just like a rock. I can hold it. I can't really do anything else with it. And I think there's valid criticism that if you are a Bitcoin holder, and let's say you want to trade your Bitcoin against USDC, I have to go to a Binance. I have to go to a Coinbase to be able to do that. Whereas Ethereum holders can swap their ETH to USDC on a decentralized exchange. But with the work that Stacks has done, now they're native Bitcoin swaps, meaning that you can just send a Bitcoin transaction on the main Bitcoin chain and swap into USDC or some other stablecoin that way, which I think is a game changer, because you're bringing that functionality here, and you wouldn't see that outside. One thing that very interesting that I've noticed just by how Clarity is designed is that there's no compiler, and all of the source code is published at the blockchain level, right? And because the source code is published at the blockchain level, I didn't expect that this is the behavior that would happen. Developers have started telling me that they have to be much more careful about the code that they publish because they know that other developers can actually read their code, right? So the quality of the code that is being published goes up. It becomes much easier to fork and remix things and understand what's going on because everything's transparent. And interestingly, the blockchain itself is almost acting as a GitHub repository of all the smart contracts, right? And there's almost like just like GitHub enabled developers to collaborate better. The Stacks blockchain and the transparency of the code, because it's source code that's published, is enabling these smart contract developers to premix work of each other and actually help improve the code base. Interestingly, like recently, there was almost like an attack on one of the smart contracts, and the developers were able to use the attack because the attack itself was public to very quickly recover, because now you know what the attacker was even doing because everything's transparent, right? So it's small decisions like that that a lot of thought has gone into in terms of how Clarity is designed. Everything points to basically making things more secure and more transparent for the developers.
So one thing that I deal a lot with on ETH is like MEV problems, or like minor extractable value problems. I get sandwiched every now and again when I'm making trades on Uniswap, or like you said, like that what you were talking about, where you're seeing the attacker use a certain code that you could just recreate it. That's another form of like minor extractable value. So like, are there any issues with that on the Stacks blockchain? And is there any way to mitigate it if there is?
Yeah, I think the minor extractable value is a very kind of like real concept that will exist in any setting, right? Like whenever there's value being exchanged, and a miner can actually just reorder the transactions to extract some value. This is a very fundamental concept, and I think it exists on Ethereum more because of their current success, because there's just more activity happening over there. So I think at some point you'll start seeing some of this behavior kind of like more visible in the Stacks ecosystem as well. But I think there's nothing in the technology here. I think the behavior would be different because things are more transparent on the Stack side. Like everyone would have to make their contracts public on the blockchain. But it's a fundamental concept, and I think at some point we'll see it happen on the Stack side as well.
Mm-hmm. And for Brittany, like, how can I find the projects that are up and coming? So I do know I actually used one project yesterday, which is Archideco. I took some stacks from Okcoin and took it to Archideco. I actually used the Hero wallet, and so I stacked my stacks in Archideco, borrowed some USDA, and then it's just sitting there until they get the swaps fixed. But where can I find like projects that are coming? Because I'm really interested in the growing Stacks ecosystem, and I'd love to be able to participate and just actually use them and try them out.
Yeah, so stacks.org, we have a newsletter where we try and aggregate all of the up and coming projects, because some of them may come through us for funding. They may come through the accelerator, or they may just be folks who jump into our Discord channel and are saying, hey, I'm building this is what's happening. It's very hard to keep track of all the things that are happening, but anything that we hear about, we always make sure and include in our newsletter, on our social channels, and our Discord channel, similar to other people. You can also, sneak on our GitHub. It has all the transparent grant applications. That's where a lot of these ideas first get started. But definitely would love to have you try out some more. I know there's some exciting stuff, like Alex is launching. That was another DeFi team that came through the accelerator with their launch coming up. So definitely check that one out. And follow me on Twitter. I will tell you which ones to check out too, if needed.
Yeah,
Alex,
you can go to stacks.ac, which is the page for the accelerator /teams. And I think there are at least like 25 teams out there. They're like NFT marketplaces. They're almost like they're full RPG video games
Moonray game.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Moonray, and you should check them out.
Alex, what are you excited about?
Well, I'd love to know. So I have two questions actually. I know you guys had there was a mempool congestion right on Stacks, and I'd love to understand what you guys have done with then and going forward to unclog the mempool to get the transactions through. And then let's talk about the future. We talked about Moonray, a good play to earn game coming out. What else? What other projects are coming out that you guys are excited about?
Yeah, so I think the mempool issue is much more fundamental, and I think we need to understand the background there. So the way Stacks is designed is we optimize for decentralization, just like Bitcoin optimizes for decentralization. And there's always a trade-off between speed, capacity, type of things, and decentralization. Like for example, you could be a data center chain where only a handful of nodes can operate data center nodes, and you're very, very fast, right? So I'm not going to take any names, but there are projects like that out there where you can't even be a miner. You have to own a data center, and then it's basically a connection between a couple of data centers, and it's a closed network, really, and they claim to be extremely, extremely fast that way. It's very easy to do. These types of things have been done in distributed systems for decades, I would say, right? Stacks is a global decentralized system, and the network capacity of Stacks, by design, is meant to be somewhere between Bitcoin and ETH1, right? Because we think even ETH1 is almost like it's hard for someone to run a node at their home. If you run a get node, get would basically take up all of your available bandwidth, and you can't run a fully archival node at your home as well. So that's the network capacity of Stacks base main chain, that it will always be somewhere between Bitcoin and ETH1, more towards ETH1 than Bitcoin. And then there are a bunch of scalability solutions. One of them is already live, at least in prototype format, called app chains. There's one that I'm working on, which is called subnets. And the way to think about subnets is that subnets can have a slightly different decentralization trade-off. They could ease off on decentralization a little bit. Let's say miners need like heavier hardware, more powerful hardware to participate, and then we can give you much faster speeds, right? But then the developers have the choice that I can go to the subnet and get much faster speeds. Let's say like even users on Okcoin, they can actually select that I want to use this network to withdraw my STX. They can actually select a subnet that will be way faster, and then maybe they want to move their assets from the subnet to the main chain, and they can do that on their own, right? So that's the way we think about scalability, that the base layer will always be optimizing for decentralization, and it will be relatively slow. But that doesn't mean that there aren't improvements that can be made. So this upgrade that's happening, the SIP 012.xyz, if anyone wants to go and check it out, it will roughly 10x the capacity of the main Stacks chain, and that's roughly within a month. So I think that would help a lot with the current mempool issues. And then once things like subnets are there, then you can imagine an application that requires like large transactions. Let's say it's an NFT marketplace, or let's say it's a DEX. So the bulk of the transactions might actually happen on a subnet or on an app chain, and then the main chain traffic would at some point stabilize based on gas fees. Like whatever people are willing to pay as gas on the main chain would result in an efficient fee market, which, by the way, when the fees go up on the main chain, the stackers earn more Bitcoin, right? So in some ways, like people who are interested in earning more Bitcoin would actually welcome the fact that there's some fee market on the Stacks main chain, because it's directly proportional. Like as people are paying more gas fees, you're earning more Bitcoin if you have locked up capital and you're an active stacker.
And I just want to add, what Madeeb said about app chains, because that's actually one of the things I'm really excited about, is the ability for application-specific chains built on Stacks. They can use a similar method of proof of transfer. So in Stacks proof of transfer, Bitcoin is burned to earn Stacks via mining, and in an app chain, it could be burning Stacks in order to get the app chain's tokens. Now, through that, those app chains could have, very specific use cases. These are like mini token economies. They would tie back to the Stacks chain, ultimately settle on the Bitcoin chain. So you get all of that capacity. You also then would be able to participate in things like stacking rewards, but maybe you're stacking that token and earning Stacks instead. So we've seen kind of an experiment with Miami Coin being a proof of transfer light. It's not quite fully an app chain, but that's a direction that they could head. And they've kind of shown how you can put rewards towards certain assets. Like they've raised millions of dollars for the city of Miami through their proof of transfer light. So I think that's a great place for builders to think about what's possible. Not only does that relieve some congestion on the chain, it also invents these new ecosystems that can do interesting stuff with the rewards.
Yeah, the nice part here is that for someone like Miami Coin, because they're also creating a platform on which you can build. And so what you can do, you can have cascading stacking rewards ultimately flowing down into Bitcoin. So let's say you build a Miami Coin and whatever that consensus is, you get some MIA, you stack MIA to earn stacks, you stack those stacks to earn Bitcoin, and so on and so forth. And you get this cascading effect down. I'm wondering if you guys, and that's one of the benefits of what you guys have built. Are you looking to build a tool to make that easy? Because look, Miami Coin came out, and we're big fans of Miami Coin. We're the first to list Miami Coin. It's not because of the way the blocks are, the 2-week cycles. It's not the easiest for a person to stack a project on Miami Coin, get my MIA, stack that to get stacks, to get the stack those to get Bitcoin. So is there a kind of cross-community development where you're able to take a lot of these projects and help them stack all the way through?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think
AppChains, just a proposal recently, and this is exactly the place where something like a grant would be fantastic. So if someone wanted to research how to build this, build the MVP using grant money, there's no equity taken, they would be able to have the funding. And then if they decided this could actually turn into a larger business, they could go then develop it. Maybe they go get funding through investors or the accelerator. So that's a path. I know there's been some excitement around AppChains, but I don't think anyone's exactly working on that yet. I don't know if Hero is, but that is something that we would love to see. So if that's you're interested in doing it, come see us at stocks.org for that.
Yeah, I think Hero is more interested in subnets, and we are trying to do some initial work there, which is great. I think this is the power of the decentralized ecosystem. The different entities could work on different types of scalability solutions. And similarly, when you were mentioning, I was saying this is the power of the decentralized ecosystem, that anyone can come in and do it, right? Miami Coin was actually one of the more decentralized launches that I've seen. It's like a mining only launch. Community members were kind of like building wallets and all sorts of explorers and different things there. And there were multiple wallets, multiple explorers. And I think that's actually great for decentralization. Where I know sometimes it can be painful because you can't look up to a single company that, hey, can you guys build this? But then on the flip side, instead of getting one solution, you would actually get maybe 5 different ones, and then you can pick the one that you like more. And interestingly, when you're talking about this cascading stacking thing, that's where Bitcoin as money and sound money kind of like comes in. Because how do you value the value of these other assets? You value them based on eventually the Bitcoin that you're going to earn at the base layer, right? So that's why building around the base money layer is important, and same for scalability. I think the one thing, if people can remember about all of the scalability discussion, is like we think that things are going to scale in layers around Bitcoin. So Bitcoin itself is the base money layer. Lightning is a faster payments layer. Stacks is a smart contract layer that is very decentralized. Then you can have app chains, you can have subnets that are further layers that are helping stacks scale as well. But in the end, like I think Bitcoin becomes the center of gravity, and you're kind of like growing the broader Bitcoin economy that way.
Yep. Well, look, guys, I think we're coming up on time. We do have 3 winners, which we should announce. 3 winners for the $100 in stacks. And so the Hero Gamer is 1. Kurt Grella, who we know well, is the 2nd. And then Godfred X Cuz is the 3rd. So if you guys have won, please DM us, and we'll get your wallet addresses and drop $100 in stacks into your wallets.
Congratulations, everybody.
Yeah, now you can go stack them on Okcoin too and earn BTC.
That's right. You guys, one of the things that Sam and I like to do towards the end, nothing to do with stacks, but a lot to do with give us a tip or something that you think everyone should go do, read, experience. It can be anything in your lives, just like your tip to the world, if you will.
Brittany, you want to go first?
Oh man,
Silence
that's a tough
falls
one.
upon. Yeah,
I mean,
silence.
I can go. It's an easy one, right? So one of my favorite science fiction novels of all times is Snow Crash. If you have not read Snow Crash and you are in crypto, you are doing yourself a disservice. You should go read Snow Crash, and then the crypto economy and the metaverse would start making so much more sense to you.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, mine was going totally different direction, which I was just thinking about. I have a trip coming up to go hiking in Utah. And if you're in America and you have not been hiking out in all the parks in Utah, the national parks, they are fantastic. So that's the not as cool as the metaverse, but the real verse.
The real verse. We should make it a thing. We should call it hashtag real verse. That's right. Well, look, I mean, Sam, I think we're coming up in the hour. We can wrap here. Thank you both.
What about
so
your
much
tips?
For...
What about your tips? You tell us our tips and then we'll.
That was good. What a good call out.
I was waiting for it.
Well, for books, hey, I'll tell you some things that I like to do. I feel like I wake up and I read about crypto, and then I come to work or go to the other room to go to work, and then go to sleep reading about crypto. So when I like to decompress, I also like hiking. I haven't been to the park, so I got to go. But one of my all-time favorite books are Pat Conroy books. Beautiful prose, just very soft kind of writing. And so when I want to unplug and just read, and then actually our colleague Shimon told me to read Bitcoin Billionaires, and I'm listening to that. And it's just a fun, really quick, fast, fun read about the Michaelos and Gemini and the early days, the early OGs in the space. So what about you, Sam?
Me, I've been buying a lot of art recently. This whole NFT thing has kind of like kicked off something like a bad obsession. My wife is actually pretty annoyed at me because I have too much art actually to go on the walls now. But through a friend, I found a really cool artist called James Jean. He's just incredible. He's a Asian American artist from Taipei, based in California, and he does just incredible work. And he just did a drop, like a real drop, not an NFT drop, but like a real art drop the other day. And I got this print and then also a relief as well too. So it's just amazing stuff. I would really recommend to go check out his stuff.
Fantastic. Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
Yeah. I feel you guys are always welcome back. I feel it's kind of short. These things, we usually go for an hour, but these things always feel not long enough. So, but Brittany and Muneeb, you guys were great. Alex, great co-host, and I had a great time. This is really fun. I really wish it could have gone longer. We're going to have to do this again. Please come back once there's some huge announcements, the scaling solutions, all the new DeFi projects for Stacks that's coming, all the things that the foundation is doing. We're really excited to see it. I know that Miami Coin's been huge, and Stacks has been one of my new favorite projects over this past year. So thank you so much for coming on, and I'll leave it with you, Alex, to finish things up.
Yeah, thanks, guys, and we'll see you guys soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.